All right, Bridgette, rugby interview, take one. All right, Bridgette, playing women's rugby. I think the big question coming into Fairfield is, have you ever heard the game before, and what made you join and play for the Fairfield women?
Can't say that I had heard of the game before. I'd always played high school sports, and knowing that I wasn't good enough for college sports, my family suggested rugby because one of my sister's friends played, and I said, I never really thought of that as a women's sport. And so I went on the website and looked up anything on the women's game and any contact email, found an email address, sent an email, and they said, yeah, our season starts right away, so I would start running now to get into shape. And so I got really nervous, and I thought it was a pretty big deal and that they were actually tough. And so my first day in the field, about 5 or 6 players showed up, and we did a couple laps and basically called it the day and just hung out and socialized. And they seemed pretty friendly, so I decided to stick around for a few more days, and a few days turned out into 4 years.
Nice. So what years, you played all 4 years, what was the status of the women's team back then?
When I first started, we were lucky if we had enough players for the game. We usually lost by quite a bit, and it wasn't always the most well-played sport, but over the years we kind of got a little more serious. Halfway through my end of my sophomore, beginning of my senior year, it was our first year with a coach, and so from then on we became more serious, actually started to practice and put together plays, assigned real positions. And I think after our first season with a coach was our first season that we made it to finals, so it became an upward trend.
All right, with such a building team, and it's probably hard enough generating interest, just getting players to play. How are you guys able to generate interest around the school to get friends and even alumni to come down, watch you guys play, and just generate interest in that way?
Most of the girls that started playing had never heard of rugby before they came to the school, and so I think a lot of people that didn't play didn't even know that there was a women's team and wouldn't have thought that it's anything enjoyable. So to get any sort of fan base, we usually dragged our roommates or tried to get anyone we could to come. And at first we didn't have many people, and there were a few teammates whose parents would show up every game or every other game with oranges, or like my mom, trying to learn everyone's name on the sideline and support them in addition to me, just because we didn't have any other fans to cheer for us. But I think over time, as we started to become more recognized at the school and we started winning games and making a name for ourselves, and slowly people were interested, and maybe let's just hang around after the men's game or show up early and catch them in the women's game. So
now, how about, you mentioned a large part of your fan base coming up was parents. How did parents receive their daughter playing rugby?
I think the fathers kind of enjoyed it. I think some fathers like the fact that their daughters are tough and can kind of hold themselves, and they just probably enjoy the sport as it is. And I think it's like anything, it's probably shocking to see your daughter out there getting hit or tackling someone, but I think they come around to it. And if your daughter tried out for equestrian and all of a sudden she's playing rugby, then it is kind of a shock. But I think for the most part, they just enjoy that their daughter's playing something and kind of part of a team, especially if they had been used to their daughter playing sports in high school. Then I think they're used to the athleticism.
All right, now how about, you said you were without a coach for the first 3 years that you were playing. How did your teammates learn the game?
We picked it up from prior year players, and we just passed along anything and everything we knew and kind of put that together during practice days. And then some of it came together at the game day, some of it didn't. We usually had coaches from other teams that provided us with some advice, and oftentimes it was the refs trying to give us advice and show us what to do, and it ended up helping us play a safer game. So
now, how about, you said that you had 6 players on the field showing up to practices. You guys obviously split the field with the men's rugby team. What was the relationship with the women's rugby team and the men's rugby team at that time?
We never really talked to the guys. They didn't really regard us as serious about the sport, mostly because we were playing leapfrog and chase the bacon and Red Rover, anything like that. But so it took a little while, I think, once we actually started coming together as a team with a coach and winning some games, and they started to regard us as somewhat serious. And I think now there's a good dynamic between the two teams. But anytime before that, the guys were really just wanting to take over their field, and so anytime they had a scrimmage, they would take 10 yards and take 10 more yards, and pretty soon we just had the tri-zone to practice in. So.
How about the women's rugby team? When you played, what was the structure in terms of leadership roles, officers, things like that?
We had the traditional structure of any intramural club sport, and within rugby we had the president, vice president, match secretary, treasurer, and we usually had those appointees to kind of gather all the work and execute it. But other than that, it was a pretty much a group effort amongst the team. I mean, we consulted everyone with every decision that we wanted to make. It was pretty transparent between the leadership and the team, and as far as what we had to do as a club to make ourselves function and how we had to comply with whatever the university wanted us to do. So.
Right. How about with little experience coming in and playing, and with really no coaching, little organization, how were positions filled? How did you guys determine who played what position?
Well, as far as front and backs, it usually came down to size and speed. But after that, it was kind of, you showed us what you had on the field, and we assigned positions as needed. And some people had certain skills that from high school sports that they had played and that suited well. Kind of like anyone that had played soccer, we immediately considered for fullback, and any of the bigger girls we kind of considered for forwards. The really short ones got to play hooker. But it basically came down to that, and whoever was quickest got the wings.
All right. Going back, were there any rituals, traditions with the team that you remember?
My favorite was rookie suicides.
Rookie
suicides. We, towards the end of the season, we love to welcome our rookies during practice time, so we picked any Thursday or basically any day to make them do suicides. But on each line there was a cup of water or a cup of Gatorade that they had to reach down and drink as proof that they would actually reach down and touch the line, and it was a race between two teams. And needless to say, there were a few surprises in the cups once they reached down to drink them, and having to run back after sucking that cup down was pretty painful. It kind of burned, but it was all for fun, all safe.
Good. How are with rookies or newer members? How do they come into the team? How are they made to feel? How are they brought along?
We're pretty much like a family. I mean, any of the older students treat the rookies and any new players as little sisters, and just kind of welcome them with open arms. And everyone that is looking to play rugby is relatively laid back, and so we all end up getting along, and we form pretty close friendships within the team. Some of them lasting friendships. But yeah, I remember some of the seniors when I was a freshman. Some of the seniors definitely took me under their wing and brought me out and showed me more than just rugby at Fairfield.
Now, about one of my favorite questions that Chris has down here. The social side of rugby has always been a universal tradition. How well do the women's team uphold that sacred trust?
We did a really good job at it, I think. The combination of being a rugby player and then going to Fairfield definitely make sure that you continue the tradition. But I'd say as far as the women's team progressing and changing over time, we used to wear bows on the field and during games. And when I was there, we had our first girl wearing a scrum cap, so it's definitely quite the change. But I think as far as upholding the social tradition, we definitely had our rugby get-togethers and socials, and remember our first Christmas party. At the end of it, I woke up taped to a couch, still dressed in a snowman costume. But I think one of my favorite memories was just how much fun the girls had in one of our welcoming ceremonies. We titled it the Fairfield 500, similar to the Indy 500, and everyone was given a sponsor, and they had to make a race car that represented their sponsor, and that was what they would wear through the entire welcoming ceremonies with whatever was on their scavenger hunt list. And at the end culminated with every girl racing down Reef Road in their little cardboard box race cars, trying to make it to the end of the night. But I think that was definitely one of my favorite memories as far as socializing goes. I think one of my favorite songs was Free Beer for All the Ruggers, and then sharing it all out of your cup. I won't sing.
Who was the most vocal from your group?
From my year, Lauren Caggiano and Erica Sabello were probably the loudest and most vocal.
Now, do you remember? Do you have any favorite teams that you guys had down, or?
I remember going up to SUNY New Paltz and always getting pounded. Can't say that was a favorite team. I think we were always well matched with Stony Brook, so we knew kind of going into the game that it would definitely be a fight for the win. I think most of the time we beat them, but I think that was who we knew we were most well matched against and had to fight the hardest for. So,
how about jumping around a little bit? But I think from the men's rugby side of things, we all know what the post-match entails. What might be different that the women do, after matches?
We didn't do anything different, and a lot of the times other schools were tougher than us and wanting to uphold the tradition more than we did. So we had to, not that we had to do anything, and usually we kind of ran away from anything that the other teams tried to make. But I think women's rugby does a good job in keeping everything the same, scary as it might be.
How about, I'll break it up a little bit here. Let's go, because I think we'd like to discuss any particular, players, games, incident situations. I think it would be funny to start with, especially for the nicknames. What were some of the nicknames from when you played from the women's side?
They were definitely not limited to myself. There were a couple rookies that were always given the name Animal because they were just an animal on the field. They literally took out any girl with the ball that they saw. I think my favorite has to be Scoops. She thought the name Hooker was too promiscuous and didn't want to play the position if she was given that name. So she thought scooping the ball was more appropriate. So that ended up her name. And then, there are other names that come with upholding the tradition of rugby and the socializing that comes about with that, and the stories that come out during those times. And some of them you can't really talk about here, but definitely good ones. Can't tell your mother about.
Now, how about going on then? Any particular incidents, games, anything funny, ridiculous, shocking that you can remember?
Well, my favorite game was the game to the finals. It was our first year with a coach, and we actually started to win, and we won enough games to make it to the finals, and pretty excited about it. And things just kind of started to unravel that entire day. Needless to say, we never actually made it there, but it was a good first year with a coach.
You care to elaborate?
Some people didn't really wake up on time. It was a Saturday morning. We ran into bus troubles. Once we got to Columbia, it was kind of hard to get to the rugby field, and we missed our first round of the tournament, so they wouldn't let us in after that. So we had to go home.
All right, how about then going forward, how would you describe the progress of the women's team now from where you began?
The stories I heard from before we started, some people couldn't even make it through a game because of the night before. And then we usually used to lose 50-0. And then we slowly turned it around. We started winning a few games, tied some. And then a few years later, after I left, the girls ended up winning their entire division. They were undefeated for the entire year and made it to nationals. And made it to nationals a couple years in a row, and now they're ranked in the U.S. So I would say within the 10 years, it shows tremendous growth for the team and definitely a lot to hold in the future.
Now you're about to head off to Colorado, job opportunity. How do you think rugby prepared you for life after college, life in the real world? Not only with work, but personal.
I mean, when I played on the rugby team, I wasn't just a teammate. I also was captain and served as co-president one year, president another, and I'm going through a career change right now. And one of my motivations for this, when I kind of reflected on past experiences, was, what was I most successful in and why? And rugby was a prime example of, I was really interested in it. It was something that, as a group, I had enough people to motivate me and enough people that were also interested in it. And together we made something successful, and I continued doing that after college, being a part of Friends of Fairfield Rugby. And because of that, I use that experience, whatever you're interested in, you can be successful in. And so I'm pursuing nursing.
Great. Now, and you still stay in touch with a lot of the girls you played with, a lot of the alumni still? I
do. A few of my teammates from my year, we ended up living down at the beach together senior year, are still very good friends. And I'm still good friends with a lot of the younger players from younger years, and we keep in touch and try to get together. And I know that girls from other years do the same, so it's a pretty close-knit group.
How about, I guess, really in closing, looking back on your years of involvement with rugby and playing for Fairfield, what has playing for Fairfield women's rugby meant to you, overall?
Just meant being part of a team. And sometimes there were times when I thought Fairfield had a very homogenous population, and rugby was something different, and it kind of brought you together with a group of people that weren't always homogenous, and it was just, everyone was really laid back. It was always a great time. We were able to separate work from play and enjoy every minute of it, and being a part of a team and working towards something aside from school kind of really meant something.
Oh, good. So. All right, I guess, last thing we'll do real quick is just if you have anything you want to add about Fairfield Rugby, Fairfield Women's Rugby, the history.
Yeah, we haven't been around that long, but I can definitely see us being around for another 20, 40, 50 years. Definitely making a name for ourselves as a group within the university, and also helping advance the women's rugby movement.